keeper.
I just remembered.
But anyway, right after our meeting, I discovered some really good resources that we can use. So I'm pretty happy about that. And I've got to put them in a form so that they can go on our website, on the conference website. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Well, and I'd ask each one of you to take one question and make notes when we come to that question, starting with number 2. And we are also recording this, and it's also being recorded up there. So we're going to really have good, complete notes on what everyone has to say. And I made the suggestion that we stick to 15 minutes for each question so that all of you would come prepared with your comments beforehand, so we wouldn't be wandering off into the wilderness. And so I think I can keep on starting out at 25 after 5. And I'm going to start with question 2. So what makes the St. Francis Church Council most effective, past, present, and future? We have some old timers here.
Well, could we start with, it is a place where communication is encouraged, so people aren't off not knowing what other folks are doing. So it's a way that we can share information about things that are coming up or whatever. But it's a very, in that sense, a transactional sort of sharing of information.
Well, it's communication between the committees. So we all know what the other guys are doing, which helps.
I would also say that in the meetings, we get some new ideas, not only about what people are doing, but when we report in and get feedback from each other, then we can expand what we might be thinking to do in our committees.
Or we might team up with another committee if we're kind of on the same line.
One of the best titles that I ever had for a church council was a church that called their church council the Vision Council. And I like that sense of that this is the group that sets the vision and is looking long-term rather than at specific tasks.
So I think it's important to expand our thoughts into the future and what does that church, and then by design, church council look like? And some of the things I see are technologically based, that we will be utilizing technology in ways that we haven't in the past. And to embrace that, because I think because we have, for lack of a more delicate term, a geriatric church, people are not particularly comfortable with new technology. And so how do we embrace that? How do we help those who are not familiar with it become more familiar?
Seems to me that we ought to also, talking about vision, talking about church as a whole and how we grow it. Attract families, I think. In particular. It seems to me that really important part, as you were talking about the geriatric part. The other part of that is bringing on people who know technology and who can bring it in. And how we've tried this in the past, how St. Francis can be participate or be a member of the community in which we live, neighborhoods and things like that, because it seems like I come from 10 miles away, people come long distances. Getting the word out about what's going on here, what kind of opportunities there are for meetings and for church or for Sunday school, perhaps, or whatever. Find better ways to communicate with our neighbors.
I guess I want to focus more on making it effective in the future. And I love the fact that we are having a conversation at this meeting. Our meetings are generally very transactional. Report, report, report. If we were together, we could pass the cookies around and then go home, right? And when we have a chance to really dig into an issue or to talk about or have a generative conversation, I think that's when some exciting things happen, when ideas are exchanged or new ideas. And so I feel we could be more effective if we could figure out a way to get the routine information exchanged, but actually have topics that are more strategic in nature and more, where we get creative and we're really, trying to solve a problem or think outside of our current box or whatever it might be. Because this is the body of the church that's empowered between charge conferences. So it's a really important body of the church.
Mhm.
And I'd love to see its actions. And they're good things. Like I think it's great that the sort of strategic planning that we're doing with charting the course kind of came out of the church council. I think ideas can come from here and then other people can pick up on them. But when we are together, and we'll talk about some other stuff later, I guess I'm just suggesting if we get more generative in our work together, it could be really powerful.
What's coming to my mind, most of you know, I've been around this place 40-some years, and I don't know how many of those years I've been on the church council. But best I never remember ever discussing the purpose of the church council.
Which is pretty darn important.
I mean, I'm not saying it didn't do effective things and all that, but I never remember having the kind of questions that you've raised here, June, and having this kind of conversation, ever. So I think it's, maybe time.
Mhm.
We don't want another 40 years to go by for you.
Yeah.
Can you hear us okay?
I can hear you okay. I can read you okay.
Okay, good.
That is
Do you
super.
think you've had a chance to jump in, or would you like us to be quiet for a minute so you can?
Well, are we still on the first question?
Yes.
Yeah,
I responded to the first question. And I don't think I have anything more to add to that right now. But thank you.
Oh, Cecilia, do you have anything to throw into the pot?
I don't think so. I mean, 100 years ago, for a number of years, I was secretary to church council. And I just have to say, well said, Paula.
I think Paul is absolutely right. By generative, I think you need to generate new ideas.
And we have real
Yeah.
conversation about important things. Yeah.
Just our committee did this, our committee did that.
That means there has to be communication about what is important. Because I know that you receive a lot of emails,
On newsletters and
newsletters and
blasts.
whatever. And so really keeping your eye on the ball is part of it as well.
But at least part of why that's important right now, what Paula said, is that many of our things over the last 2 years are different than what they were 2 years ago. And we have to decide, do we resurrect what was, or do we build a different? Right? So it's a remarkable opportunity to decide.
Another dimension might be the fact that we do have a budget, and the budget does in fact reflect certain committees better than others. And so the question comes, okay, so trustees has a certain amount of money for capital improvements. It's been budgeted. Okay, who makes the decision to expend that? Well, obviously trustees, but do trustees need to ask permission from somebody else beyond that? Or can we in fact assume, because we go through the budgetary process, the trustees have submitted requests that in general the trustees can handle it? And don't if you want to know every single bit I got for the resurfacing of the Celebration Center contract and all that, what I learned about concrete in the process, I'll gladly share that with you. But I don't think that's, but I think, again, the point is, at what level do people want to know what kind of information is, and when are they satisfied, and again, that's again the communication thing. And I maybe a fault, but well, how much did I share with about resurfacing it? People said this, people said that, but it was nothing systematic. In that sense.
Well, and I think there's really two answers to that. I think there's how much do I want to know, and how much do we need to know?
Need to.
You know what I'm saying? So how much should be shared in this body versus how much do I need to go outside of this circle and say, tell me more about it? And that's any of the different committees.
But I think generally there is a little confusion, and I think Shar, we had a good example of this, where we hadn't expended any of the money that was in the budget for childcare, and Shar's like, okay, I think it's time, I think we got to start this up. Who do I have to get permission from, or do I have to? And I've been more of the attitude, hey, if it's in the budget, you're good to go. But yeah, I'm but I think that these are governance issues, and we'll get to it in question 5.0, but there are a lot of governance things that we could clear up here, I think. And all be on the same page about.
Okay. Coming out so far is, we need a vision. We need to really have a definite statement of what we are
And why we are.
and why we are. And right now, we're just kind of fumbling around.
The other thing I would add to that is, what are the priorities? Because there's lots of things you can say, this is what we are, but what are we going to do now? What's that 3-month, 6-month, 12-month plan?
And I want to throw this in. I think that our discussion is going to help CTC. As it moves.
I think there's going to be a give and take around that.
I think there is a real strong give and take.
So Paula hit on defining structures. And one thing about well-defined structures, it allows people to live with inside those structures in a freed up way, because they know their responsibilities, they know when they're in their lane, they're freed up. When there's no structure, they're hesitant to make a move, or
maybe too quick to complain about something that someone else did.
and so each structure fits with another and produces higher productivity. So just
Okay,
Can
now
I-
I want,
Can I share something?
sure.
So recently I So CARE team is about to transition leadership. And so Harlow, Cyrus and I and Pat Fox have been restructuring that and created a clear mission statement. And also, I even have copies of it if you guys want to see the mission statement. But he worked in organization for a long time with nursing, computers and everything, but awesome experience working with him on identifying our scope of care, what we do and what we don't do, but also looking at managing complex change. This is an awesome, I have a few copies I could share, but this is just an awesome example of when something is working, what needs to be in place. And I think that the fact that things aren't working as smoothly is because some of these things are missing. So, and I won't go into this, he would be much more suited to do that, but this is, he's looking at. I have a few copies of this in the mission statement for CARE team if anybody's interested. But that process, I feel could go for every single team or committee or ministry that we have to revision our mission statement, to become clear about who we are now and where we're wanting to go.
Okay, and we're almost done with our 15 minutes. I did have one last question for Art. Because when I met with John Wilson, when I assumed this job, he gave me a pattern. He gave me what the church council did. And it was pretty defined. Is that how the church council has behaved in the past, or has it changed over the years?
One is I know that John put a lot of effort into it. He did something that we hadn't, I don't think previously done. I'm not sure how, whether it was all accepted or agreed to, truly reflective. It was a lot of effort by John, and he felt this need was needed. He developed it by asking each committee for its input and all that, which I remember doing that for trustees. But as far as how it was, what happened afterward, it's kind of John retired, rightly so, having produced this, but I'm not sure how, we ever tried to, well, number one, but was it useful to you when you came in as chairperson?
Well, it was, because I didn't know what I was doing. So it was very helpful. And we had someone who was taking notes. So we were just kind of moving along at his own speed. And I was kind of learning as we went, including people who represented the different committees and everything. So it was, if I were going to say one thing for the future for St. Francis, if anytime someone assumes a chair, that they be really trained before they come into it. And that, I know we're always looking for people to do that.
Well, and since I wasn't, and to your credit, I said, John, you'd be ideal, take it now. And he said, let me sit and wait for a year. Okay, she wants to wait for a year. Well, of course, in the process, then you were doing two things. One, you were learning, also deciding, is this what I really want to do?
Yeah.
There's two sides to that, shepherding, so that you in return, what you're getting into and know where you want to go with it, and you need to, you can't say everybody, I didn't know while you were there, you can't say, I wish I had made it, anyway, so.
Well, I just made a suggestion for future chairs, that they have some background, that from whoever. John was very helpful. But he was just, I met with him just one time. And that would have been.
I would like to add something to that, June. I
Yeah.
think that what John gave you was a structure. And we've talked a lot about structure here, and that was a guide. And however you would want to use that to move forward could be helpful to you. But
Yes.
the deeper thing we're talking about is, who do we want to be? And I think Jim's question about, do we go back to the way we were before COVID, Or do we redefine ourselves or maybe fine tune ourselves to look at another way of being? And I would just like to add my thinking in that. I think our strength is that we are a community, not that we're a Christian community, but we are a community that embraces people and makes people want to come be a part of us. And during this time, I don't think churches in the traditional way attract a lot of people. But as a community offering, we might look at ourselves in a little larger way, enter a larger room maybe. But I think we have this opportunity to look at how we want the structure to be, but the structure should be have the underlying definition of what we want to be.
Okay, well, we have moved past almost 20 minutes, so we're gonna move on to question 2. Three. So, what makes participation in the St. Francis Church Council most meaningful for you and for the group?
And I am the note taker.
Yep.
Confirm that I'm doing that.
Now, Art's
So
doing,
for this question,
Art's doing.
I think one of the things in this discussion is that we have to feel free to say things that are not all positive. And I think we often shy away from that because we don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. I do not find the church council to be a meaningful experience for me. It's something I do out of obligation. And yet there's a part of me that thinks it could become more meaningful, which is kind of echoing back to what I said before. But I think right now it is lacking for me.
And having not been here before, because this is reports and there's.
Yeah, and there are people that probably would have something really important to share with us, but they've decided not to participate any longer, or they're too busy. Maybe it's the frequency of the meetings or the timing of the meeting, not sure what it is, but so we're not all here. And then it's very report.
And my feelings are much along the same line as has been a place just to make a report and hear the other reports. It's not a dynamic group of fresh ideas and information. I mean, there's limited information, but ideas and information around grand things, new things. Some of the things that I've witnessed, and I think that this committee it falls in this committee's lap, is we have people in our congregation that are passionate about certain things, willing to participate to a degree, but they come up short. And I think they come up short because they don't see a support system for them to be successful, or they don't know where the levers are. There's these question marks. How do I make that happen? A new chair coming in to chair the committee. Where are all the levers? Where, for each ministry, well, like for Harlow, it's a new experience for him. He needs to be supported to be successful. And it sounds like that's happening. But that needs to happen in all streets and for all our leaders.
I think one of the reasons that's successful is because I am not a chairperson advocate. I like teams. I think there should be working in a leadership team. That's how I wanted to do with welcoming, which, by the way, I realize it's not my job, that I went into care going, let's do this. Let's include Pat, who's been doing this, and I'll come in and we're working as a leadership team. And I think that's what's made it so successful for Harlow, because he and I can work through, there's been several meetings. We haven't even met with the care team yet, and we've had like 3 meetings that all been really exciting and fun and looking at how we're gonna move forward. So that's, I
So-
think, thinking in that way, as we move forward, I think it's really helpful.
So one thing that's been tossed around in Charting the Course and other committees is the idea of having a team, what are we calling it? Leadership development and the part about identifying leaders,
Featured leaders like nominating or
nominating
talent scouts.
talent scouts.
Talent scouts.
A group of leaders. Doesn't have to be a big group, but the leaders in that group or team are familiar with all the levers. All of how it functions, that they can pass along that knowledge. They're not chairs of a committee, they're a support team for other leaders. So that people would have a source to go to, much like Harlow is using you as a source. But they each have a source.
I think it also, we could look at this through programming once I get fall underway. But, I think I think it'd be really fun to have some leadership training.
Mhm.
And there's so much going on in leadership right now of how we, looking at collaboration and new ways of thinking about leadership. It's just really an awesome time to be exploring that as a community. So that someone who doesn't always have the gifts that they've used their entire career could go, but I want to try this. So how do we support someone in trying something new for themselves?
Mhm.
And maybe some kind of trainings that
Mhm.
might help that.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? Okay, good.
And there seems to be that resource available with, the pastor, Jim, and people will kick around those ideas, like Joe with Water in the Desert and stuff like that. They'll come with fresh ideas. But once they're engaged, how do they, because to ask Jim or you to shoulder all that is a big lift. People could have a resource for, where do I get my questions answered? How do I become successful? So with that, I want to show you, I want to introduce this because I wanted to have this conversation. But I was introduced to this book.
It's called Governance and Ministry, for those of you who can't quite read it from the distance.
And in it, this person presents fresh ideas about, number one, how to make the shift from the old paradigm to the new one. So recognizing that the church of yesterday isn't going to work in the church of tomorrow. And so how do we get there? And then he talks about structures, well-defined structures. And Chuck and I were having a conversation earlier, and he mentioned, and too much structure is not a good thing either. And that's accurate. So I would like to propose that leaders, that we have a book study with leaders about this book.
And I've spoken to Shar about that, and we talked about whether or not it would be adult education and would be billed as that, or is it just something separate that we just do and that we target it for leaders. And I'm the one that told Tom about this book, and in the church that I went to in Connecticut, we had some study groups with this book, and I led a book group for it, and we'll have all my notes and all the scribbles in the margins and stuff, and would be willing to help facilitate that, where we read a chapter or two at a time and, talk it through, digest it, and then go on to the next. So wondering if our leaders in our current structure would be interested in that.
Absolutely. It sounds like think shifting paradigms is really important. We are in the middle of it right now.
I would be interested in exploring the idea of expanding to anybody who's thinks maybe they would want, I mean, we have a member recently who just retired and, the possibilities are endless, so.
Who would
limiting-
self-select? Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
are you interested in leadership in this kind of way? I think this is a really exciting thing. And, right now, adult ed is on some kind of walkabout, I don't know where they are.
Yeah.
But so I think we just move forward with, and did we set up a time?
No, we talked, we,
Okay.
you said, should we look at October Sundays, and I've got some issues with some, so
Yeah.
we need to go,
Yeah,
get into that again.
Yeah, I'm just getting back in the office.
That's one positive.
I think this is really,
Yeah.
so.
It's possible, because we're not doing reports today. It's possible, I'm not sure about the timing, how fast you want to launch something like this, but it's possible this could be introduced at the leadership focus groups that CTC is going to be putting on in the not too distant future.
Oh.
So it could be, hey, here's an idea, folks. As leaders, what do you think? Would you participate? I don't know. I don't know if that fits.
Yeah, and if we have it set up and we're beginning to promote it, that it's a very natural tie-in. Remember we had a finance town hall last year? That's why I
Oh,
said we need to
really?
do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
because there's a whole thing about how you use town halls in church.
Yep. Sounds good to me.
Maybe we could do that then before we had our bigger meeting with CTC.
Well, there'll be focus groups with I can't even say it, CTC.
The next thing CTC is doing is hopefully we have 10-member focus groups of leaders, current and former leaders. They've already been identified. They're on the list. We already have the list of 20. And now it's just invitation, getting with the consultant. She has been coming up with a list of, what's the word? It's a special word.
Scapegoats. Just kidding.
Is it about the
The
facilitation of it,
type
the
of questions,
questions?
the type of has a name. And it's evocative questions.
Oh.
Okay, nice.
Okay.
So,
Mhm.
so
And it's appreciative inquiry.
Which is awesome. That work is really.
So out of that will come data. And so what these leaders have to say is to move things in a particular direction.
The other thing we know from other settings is sometimes the act alone of participating in a focus group changes you. It can deepen your commitment, increase your interest in something. I guess it can turn you off too.
Yeah.
It clarify. Yeah, so, I think there'll be benefits of these focus groups for those people that even go beyond that.
One benefit is just being there with 10 other people and having a conversation. Moving on each other. And hear what everybody has to say.
Yeah.
Later on, and I think maybe this is what you're pointing to, Wendy, is there will be a church. What are we calling it?
Summit.
Summit. Where the entire congregation, the entire body of St. Francis is invited to participate. How that gets structured exactly is unformed. Could be in conjunction with a potluck, or who knows?
Has to be, it's not a Methodist.
Got it.
And the idea is to engage in conversation similar to what has just been described, but also offer opportunities for people to engage in some part of the church in some way. If hey folks, what's your passion? And we'll have boards, and people can go put postings or whatever, and have this interactive experience of engagement.
Well, we used to have an annual fair where we had all these tables and each one of the committees and different ministries had their own table with it and would engage with and talk to people and often signed up people who didn't even know that something they were interested in was already going on. A lot of people don't read the list of ministries and they don't read this and that. But when they could talk back and forth to people, and we had it under the blue tarp once a year, remember?
Do.
Yeah, and they were quite effective. And all the tables, you had to make arrangements with upstairs to have good weather that day.
Yeah, yeah,
But,
that's how we put people in PCIC.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
Can I don't know what question we're on, but
We are,
Three is the second question, which is
I know,
number 3.
I got it.
and we are moving out of 3 in
Sorry.
about 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll try, 30 seconds, okay.
June? Hand raising. My hand is wiggling. I had just one thing to add before we moved on, if we were getting ready to move on, is I think Tom said, it's important to get new blood or new eyeballs in here. And I can't say that church council has been very effective for motivating me, because I kind of just come and listen and see what's going on, but rarely contribute anything because it was, transactional. However, there are 2 things that I think are important. One is, if we want new people, we need to have meetings when they're accessible to people. And right now, there are book groups and meetings and other things that go on in the afternoon or early evening, like 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock or early in the morning. And people who have jobs, it's just not on their radar. Now, if they could get dinner and then go to a meeting, if they're very committed, they'll do that. But 5 o'clock, people are sometimes not even off work yet, and they're racing to get wherever they're going. So, but the other thing I think that is important now that we've come back together as a community in person is to have printed bulletins again, even one sheet, because people take them with them and they look at them later. And they mark things that they want to do, but just an email blast. And honestly, some of the email blasts that come out are the same ones over and over and over again. The same one will come out 3 or 4 times. And mostly, I just don't even look at them anymore, because I know what it's going to say. So that's mine. If we're going to function as a board of governance, then, that's one of the things, Tom, in charting the course that we need to look at is, are we a board of governance? And if we're a board of governance, then we should live by that.
Cecilia, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Is that something that would appeal to you? Would you be more engaged in something like that?
Having sat on numerous nonprofit boards, yes, I think it is more encouraging to be engaged if you actually accomplish something in the meetings. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shar was gonna say something.
Yeah, sure, you had
This is so funny. What I was gonna say is that, what I find is that, especially so I have already developed my own ministry council. So I'm calling my own ministry council because they didn't want to exist and I need one, especially with youth, children and families. I can't run that in a vacuum. So I miss those meetings also because those were working meetings. We got stuff done on those nights. I think they span Tuesday nights and included food. The other thing is that in this meeting, when I was thinking about what makes my participation in it, meaningful for me, is it also, like many, it doesn't feel super meaningful because I'm always having to talk like this. This is all that I'm doing. This is what I'm covering. This is where we go Bucks. Okay. Like, we're just always trying to do it so fast. And even tonight, we're like trying to get through it as fast as we can. I don't know the answer, except that I think we need to slow down and go deeper. Like Paula, like we all are feeling.
Well, if you will remember, I sent out an email and asked everyone to, number 1, read what I had attached, and then number 2, give some thought before they came to the meeting. So they were really able to put it on the table and we didn't talk around it And that's what happens in meetings, is people talk around it instead of really putting it out there, what we do.
Yeah.
And so far, I'm hearing both talk around and some good suggestions. But that's part of participating too. So,
Just on a personal level, I like this discussion much better than I've liked any meetings that we've had that were called church council for the past few years, or maybe any of them I've ever gone to.
good.
All right, this is a much better discussion.
Okay, so we move on to number 4. And it says, how often should the St. Francis Church Council meet? And should membership include others outlined in the Book of Discipline, Organization, and Administration? Who should we have on the church council? And how often should it get together?
It's been meeting monthly, right?
Yeah.
That's different. Yeah.
But in the Book of Discipline, it didn't require that it meet monthly.
No, it's
So we could meet less frequently, but maybe to Char's point about feeling rushed, meet longer.
yeah.
So instead of feeling like we have to get it done in an hour, because people are coming to these meetings, maybe not having had dinner.
Exactly like me,
Yep.
Yeah,
because 5 o'clock is my dinner time and all our meetings running through my dinner. Yeah, but go ahead.
So, yeah, so looking at the frequency, whether we try and experiment of every other month or once a quarter, and then have maybe a 2-hour expectation, let's say, for the meeting. And then have an agenda that allows us to get the information we need, but also that allows for some real discussion and problem solving and dreaming and visioning and all of that good stuff.
I think envisioning right now is the most important part of the whole thing,
yeah.
because everything has changed with COVID. We know we can't go back to what we were before. We've also, none of us were planning this, but we've learned a whole lot more technology.
Yeah.
We ever imagined we would.
And Zoom and this and that, and how to do this on Zoom and how to do that on Zoom. And so,
Now we're getting a little bit broader than the question is how often to meet, that's the question.
And who should be who should be at the table?
The next question is membership. If you read the list, we are not including the women's group for this, the men's group for that, this, the list of entities that are supposed to be part of this don't exist in St. Francis.
Yep.
We have chosen not to have, this now, whether that's right or wrong, but the question then is, okay, it goes back to the purpose of the thing. What is in fact, membership? Why should someone be here? For instance.
and is Chrysalis still meeting? Because that's a men's group that could be represented.
Well, why would they want to be represented? They don't care.
But
They're usually a parallel women's group. I mean, their meeting had been for 15, 20 years,
And 3/4 of them aren't members of St. Francis.
But would they enjoy a few times a year being a part of what Char is describing as sort of her ministry council? Should there be a separation between governance kinds of stuff and ministry stuff? And maybe trying to have both of them in one body all the time means there are going to be people that just, aren't connecting with what's being done in the meetings.
We're still beyond again, I'm sorry, the focus, we're nothing on the conversation, but the focus of the question here is from,
But Paul makes a good point. It does.
About membership. I was talking about the membership
Okay.
It
piece.
does have to do with frequency. Governance. So what we've been talking about is a body of work to get this up, and what the conversation at this table tonight, if it were to happen the way we've talked about it, involves some heavy lifting to get it launched and underway and have these visions defined and outlines defined. And that would require more frequent meetings, may even be more than once a month to get it.
I don't see that happening.
What about some
But
groups?
I-
though?
but I think there needs to be some flexibility around that,
Yeah.
rather than a 30-day cycle. If, on the other hand, you have brought in these other peripheral ministries that are not necessarily as engaged,
Or engage different.
or
Focus.
engaged
Very
differently,
focused.
maybe it suits them quarterly. To be at a meeting, because they're not in a governance mode. So,
I would see that as done better in ministry councils. Or
It's all-
it's a gathering, not a governance sort of thing. 'Cause that would be my sense. Where they, people can share, or we just.
June. I think we're starting to talk
Okay.
around.
Cecilia, hold on just a second. Let Chuck finish his thought and then,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Or when we have those gatherings Wendy was talking about, where we talk about all the ministries, it's an opportunity to be engaged, then we could involve all these groups at those times. And they could meet other groups and also talk about themselves.
all right, go ahead, Cecilia.
Oh, I think before we start talking about who should come at the table, and I'm starting to think about what June said a little while ago, if we're kind of talking around this again, that before we do that, maybe we should define, are we a board of governance? And that's what we do. But before we start figuring out who should be at the table, we better figure out who we are and what's our agenda and our mission.
And can I make one point? I want you to observe what just happened. Not your comment, but what just happened when we went from question 2 to question 3. The first 2 questions were visioning questions. The third question was a governance question. Did you notice how the tenor of the group changed from 2 to 3? We became confrontational, less certain of ourselves when we made that switch.
What do you make of that?
What I make of it, one of the things I make of it is that we still need to define who we want to be. And especially before we start adding any more people on. And if we are a board of governance, what does that mean? And if we are a board that looks expanding our vision, what does that mean? I think those are 2 different things, and they can come together. And we need to set up times when we can talk about each one of those separately, and then at a point where they might intersect. But sometimes it gets messy when we're talking about governance and then vision comes in. We're talking about vision and governance comes in. So I think to be clear about what we're talking about.
Mhm.
So which comes first?
Well, if you read what our book says, it says our major operation is that we work with the charge council. And we were supposed to.
The charge.
The conference, that's right.
Yeah.
And that we are the decision-making body between charge conferences.
which is right around the corner.
Yes,
When you're referring to, you're referring to the activity that occurs once a year with this superintendent in charge. That's our charge.
that's our charge conference.
Yeah.
That's our governing board as a church.
And
between-
meeting over the years has been meaningless.
And between those, because it is more than anything doing just the things that we have to do. Right? It's not completely meaningless. You approve my salary.
Well,
Well,
But it is a checklist type of thing. Okay, check. And you're right. It is relatively very rote, very.
but you make the statement though, that activity controls everything else.
They are the official decision-making body.
Jim, okay,
Here's what it says. The church council is the administrative agency of the church conference to envision, plan, implement, and annually evaluate the ministry of the congregation.
yeah.
That requires.
That has never been done in the last 15, 20
I
years.
understand.
Yeah.
And the whole role of that meeting is totally misunderstood by 90% of the people in the church.
Yeah.
Which is why nobody comes.
Right. Now, we've had efforts in the past when George and I was to try and make that activity more meaningful by including something unique to St. Francis and okay, with the business done. And so something, if that is in fact true, then we have a real rethink to do in terms of that whole process and how to make that when the church is gathering as a total church, and that is in fact the governing body, the total membership of the church. That's got, we don't even understand who that is.
Or we don't have to fix that. We can keep it as the dysfunctional or not quite functional, not quite helpful body that it is. And decide what to do with the rest of it, because when that's not in session, and that's controlled more by district superintendent than what it is by any of us. We have more control as it comes to this body and to the other bodies. And where do we want governance doesn't mean that you have to do it. You have to make sure it's done.
And the church conference may be taking on a more meaningful
It is.
agenda in the future. Can wait till the next year,
Okay.
because if we do a whole lot of work in this year,
Mhm.
then we might have a brilliant idea about how to make it better. And I remember when I heard about charge conference and it was a meeting that was happening, and I wasn't sure what it even was or why I
Mhm.
should be there. And I imagine we have a lot of newer members that might be in that same place.
Especially because we have a whole lot of people who don't care if this is a Methodist church or not,
That's right.
right? And so that structure is not something that means as much to many of our members. That's a joint,
That it does. And
and it can.
So if we actually accept the fact that as long as we're United Methodist Church, it is defined as that's the ultimate governing umbrella. But that between charge conferences is, 364 days where the church council is really where the action could be and should be.
Sure. But here's the other thing that I think that we're talking about. Are those governance structures, is this the right place for that to happen? Or do we want to trust finance to make financial decisions? Trust SPRC to make decisions around employment? Because council doesn't have to make those decisions. They just have to make sure that the structure is set that makes those decisions well.
So if we had governing committees that are where authority is granted to them by the larger church council, and it's clear because each of them has a charter in the future. Right now, we have a finance charter. And it was approved by the church council. I think it may be the only charter we've got.
SBRC is
Do you have a charter?
built into
yeah, it's already.
the
built in.
discipline.
Yeah.
Those committees and trustees are the three that are the most discipline defined committees.
So you might want to take what the book of discipline says and then St. Francis it a little bit because
Yeah.
we have
So
some.
we're finding that to be something that we need to look at.
Yeah.
It's a hybrid between the BOD and what how St. Francis operates.
And it could be that this church council in its new form might be comfortable with saying finance, we want to approve the budget for the year, church council. But between, as the year progresses, as long as you're within the budget, it's up to you. Or SPRC, you've got your budget and you've got your things that you have to do. And so it's a great conversation to have.
As
Yeah.
long as other people know what's going on.
You have to explain it.
This is,
Yeah.
But
this
then
is
this-
where you get siloed
And this
and you have people not talking to each other, and that is not good either.
Right.
or people who long to know everything about everything. And
Well, we have those.
Yeah. Or why wasn't I consulted?
Well, but at least part of what I think that this body does though, is decide what is the structure that we agree on. Not that it's a perfect structure, not that it works for all time and all, you know, in all places, but that we've decided on it. And that this, and we communicate that that's what's happening. So that we know the different roles that are out there.
So it sounds like we're settling on creating a vision as our next step. Is that what I'm hearing, or?
Yeah.
You know, yes, but vision is very different, I think, than it's not a statement. We have good vision statements and we should look at those. But what I think, first of all, is we're trying to define who we are so that we can decide on what our vision is.
So role, responsibilities, expectations of members.
Yeah, that's what I hear,
Structure.
which is the next question.
Yeah, and also the other thing Jim volunteered to do, and I don't know if you've done it yet, is an structure for us, an actual chart. He was gonna draw it out so we can look at what it is now, and maybe as we continue to talk, how we see some boxes getting changed.
So you haven't done it yet?
I don't have it drawn out.
Not
So-
yet.
But maybe if we set up another meeting to continue this conversation, that would be something that would be a deliverable that we would get before we show up for that meeting. Does that make
In other
sense?
words, Jim sets up an org chart. Yeah. Next meeting. Okay, well, we've gone 15 minutes. Anything else to add to number 4? Because I didn't hear much new membership additions. I heard,
Well, I would say youth, if we can find any.
it calls for you, member.
Yeah.
It does.
I will say this, I've had people ask about youth since the very first day I became a Methodist, and it's never, ever worked well.
And at this point. 50
I'm not trying to say it's a wrong idea, a wrong vision for,
Why,
it's
why hasn't it?
mostly because, well, I'll tell you what happened in one church where I had a strong Anglo and a growing Hispanic population. So we wanted to get the Hispanics involved in.
Yeah.
And as soon as you put one of them on a committee, they felt completely disenfranchised because they didn't have anyone around them that they knew.
Oh, yeah.
And having
And-
only one.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so I think that's why youth feel disenfranchised. Can they speak and feel empowered in a group of
Sam,
adults?
I have to disagree with you, and you are on the Metropolitan Education
Sure.
Commission. We always have two youth, and we follow their lead.
I'm not saying that's not true. I think it can happen. I'm just saying that my experience has been that it rarely has.
So I'm wondering, listening, is there another option? Can youth be questioned rather than sitting at the table? Can they themselves be asked for what do they want to see?
Sure.
Put it down and have it delivered to church
That's right.
council as their voice.
That's right. Part of why that structure works on the Met board is because of that, they have an organization, youth have an organization, which allows them to be in conversation. And it feels like they are empowered voices, not just all a lone
Yeah.
voice.
Who are the youth that you speak of?
Yeah.
Well, and that's part of the question right now. Who are the youth right
Currently
now?
have one youth.
Yeah.
I'm saying they're 50 years
Oh, it
old.
needs to be.
That's our
Yeah,
youth.
and-
Yeah.
yeah. If we had 30-year-olds, we'd be happy.
Yes, we would.
Oh, 40,
yeah, there you go.
40 sounds great.
Well, if we
Well, when
had
I-
families that we did that.
Yeah.
When I first came to this church, we had families, we
Yeah.
had little kids running around, we had youth.
It's amazing what 50 years does though.
Yeah. I haven't been here 50 years.
No,
Okay.
but what I'm saying is that's the difficulty of all churches is that one of the questions you have to figure out is how to pass it on to the next generation. And we haven't in the last 30 years figured out that question very well, especially when you have a very differently empowered younger generation.
Okay, moving on.
Well,
to-
to get back to how often we should meet, which we never actually
Yeah.
addressed.
yeah,
It seems like we ought to meet monthly until, as we move through these things. Because we have a lot of things on our to-do list.
At minimum.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I'm hearing pushback from meeting more often than monthly.
And the important thing about scheduling is that, if I know it, you know, it's the third Thursday one type, type thing, I put it down there and we can protect, that around, something else happening. You can say, oh, I want to announce, it. Oh, well, wait a minute, I already have 13, 17, so we have to be regular. The other question we need to discuss is what is the best time to meet? And I would like to, raise that question. I don't know what the answer is. I'm lucky, I'm my own boss at this point. I'm retired. I have no commitments to anything other than me. But what is the best time?
Well, we can do another survey, which is what I did. And people selected.
That's fine, good. Fine, I thank you. Okay, that's what.
We can do another
No,
one.
no, 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 no.
Or maybe that form follows the function. So maybe we figure out the function first, and then we can say, well, who should be at the table and how often should it meet? Because if we take the suggestion of fewer meetings but longer meetings, or a new pattern of 6 PM on the third Tuesday of every other month or whatever. But I think if we move too quickly to survey, we're just gonna get more of the same, and
You're right on that.
That's right. Especially if we're asking people for whom this time works, as opposed to somebody who works until 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
And we're not asking them because they're not on this committee.
That's the problem. We need to find a way to ask those who are working, but who might be willing to help out. What's a good time for them to meet?
Well, we need to have, who we are asking this question
We're
for.
running around in
Yeah.
circles. Yeah, I just like to say that Tuesdays are my day. So, but I'll come once a month to this if it's, if that's what's needed, but it's almost impossible for me to find 2 days in a row. And that's just literally-
Yeah.
So, Tuesday or it. But once a month I'll come.
Yeah.
I'd be more happy to
I
come and do feed
I
me
think
dinner.
we'll stay with that. Okay, let's move on. Number 5.
And the food
Where's
question, we'll
number
get one
five?
in the notes.
People keep talking about 5. I don't.
5.0 question, what is the perception of St. Francis UMC
Okay.
organizational
I have to look at
structure?
the other pages that we were passing around.
Oh, did it not? Oh, because I did the second page, because the only,
well,
in that
That's an
version.
old one.
Yep, sorry.
We've done it. One,
I think we're asking around.
But I think the essence of this is not what the question is. It's about organizational structure. And maybe without knowing the present structure, having that in front of us, we can draw that out. The question is, what works, what doesn't work right now? What are the question marks? What's in the way of us feeling like it's an effective structure? What doesn't seem like it's helping?
I wrote on mine, like what organizational structure, just because since I've been here and I realized I came into a new position, it's been really confusing.
Yeah,
Super confusing. Who do I go to?
yeah.
Who,
I'm with you.
so that part alone,
I don't. My reaction, I don't think that you're that simple. Trustees, people, it's very contained. It's not, program, outreach, those are. So I mean, it depends, and then of course, the whole side of personnel has its own cadre of stuff around it in terms of what, confidentiality and legal stuff and all that. The guy that contains it, so you're contained, I'm contained, finance as well, is what the finance people decide to be, turns out, but, anyway, that's.
So, when we get that organization chart and if everything is truly on it, won't it be interesting to see what the overlap is between that and what leaders are actually participating in the church council today that would represent all of those parts of St. Francis? And whether or not they should be in the church council, or if there's another body that would be more appropriate for the ministry side of things. And so if they get moved over to another group communication group or whatever, then what does that leave? And like, does celebrate, if Mike Wilkinson were at this table every time we met, would he be bored silly if, if what we're really dealing with is governance? But if he were in a ministry group that met periodically, maybe it would be thrilling and exciting and wonderful.
So you're going back to like the need for the ministry council.
Yeah.
But like in my role, I kind of need to know, like, just Chuck was so gracious to email me right today and like, what is the process of hiring
Yeah.
someone for the nursery? And like, what was the question that I was just like, I don't know, who's the committee? Jim and Shar, like, so that part of getting clarification on that is really.
And maybe Chuck, part of what you said when you're looking at things is maybe the way we've been doing it isn't the best way to do it.
I think there's,
We're working on the process in terms of personnel. Yes, with SPRC, for sure.
and I think there's two things you have to ask. Who reports to who?
Yeah.
Right? What permissions have to be given? Type of thing. But I think the other side is just as equally important. I'm not certain we spend as much time there. How do we inform each other as things happen?
Exactly.
That comes.
That
down
makes
to the
sense?
Transparency.
But it's not just transparency. I mean, how do we make it so that we are supporting each other through the ways that we know each other? Does that make sense? So that each committee doesn't feel on their own out there, but that feel like they've got some type of structure around them that helps them.
Well, and here you just circled right back around to question number one, and I was saying we need a support structure for people.
It asks your perception of St. Francis UMC organizational structure, my perception. And it's not just my perception, because it's something we have identified in CTC, is that and it's amazing to look at this and see that in just 3 years. So 3 years ago, there was a completely different leadership structure in place than there is now. And we've lost a number of leaders from that group. And what was happening from that point further into the past is that those leaders, and Art has been right there with them all, they were so well, the nucleus of that leadership was so in touch with one another and on the same page and communicating everything that was going on, that the structures weren't necessary. They didn't need them because it worked well. Then along came COVID. What happened in COVID was all these committees, all these leadership bodies dissipated because they could no longer meet. And what happened was that staff filled that void in leadership and making decisions and making policy. And thank goodness for that, because it kept the church afloat. It kept it whole. So now, after COVID, now we're coming back and we're trying to redefine or re-find ourselves in these leadership bodies, and there's missing pieces. And primarily is those powerful leaders that were here with us before. And who knew how everything worked. They knew all the levers, who to talk to if you wanted to get something done. And
not only that,
and
They're gone.
frayed edges have come to the fore.
and the people that have replaced them
You know,
don't have that knowledge. So
and not only
that's
that,
just my perception
the
of
complaints.
the progression of what brought us to where we are.
Yeah.
What about the complaints?
The complaints that I was hearing below the surface erupted with COVID. And I mean, the whole thing started coming out of the woodwork. I know that
We
you,
were all spiritually depleted. And
yeah, well, it's more than that. And I doubt if I get the phone calls. And because they figure that I'm the one person that they can call, I guess. And so it started, they're more dissatisfaction. And I'm not sure why that is true, but it is.
And there's some lack of trust.
Yes,
Somehow trust was eroded, and I'm not sure what happened.
I'm not either.
Well, in a way, that's nationwide, that the dissatisfaction and complaints are skyrocketing everywhere you look.
Okay.
So what kind of magnetism would that have if we were able to reestablish trust in a world that's not trusted?
I think that's.
When people
important.
saw, oh, look at that group.
Yeah,
That would
I
be
could go over there
magnificent.
and
Yeah,
and feel safe.
I think also in terms of leadership, we had leaders that long held positions simply pass away. And what hadn't happened, which Jim talks about frequently, is no one had been trained to step up. And so now we're flying by the seat of our pants.
Replacements were not cultivated.
Right, so that's another thing,
and you know, the church bulletin used to have a little thing there on the front page that told you who was chair of which committee, and you knew who to contact if you wanted to do that.
I recreated that, it's on the welcoming table. And, you know, there's a few things reconciling, it has no leadership, it's all that, has no leadership, well, Wendy and I are kind of hanging out there, but also like writing that up. There's no, some people have mission statements, some people don't, you know,
There's inconsistency, and also,
Yes.
if nobody wants to serve on something, why do we pretend like we have it? Why don't we just say, we used to have a reconciling group, it was great, it served its role. It's gone away, because now we're doing this and this and this. You know, Jim Collins, who wrote a very important book years ago about how organizations move from good to great, and he then wrote a paper on nonprofits. And he says, look at what is really central you are, that is essential, what's at your core, and you keep that and you change everything else, and you have to be open to changing everything else. And I think we may have over time just assumed we can add things, but it's hard to abandon something
Yeah.
that isn't needed or isn't
Because,
working.
well, St. Francis has always done it. So I've heard that one from far more.
Well,
than
and
once.
getting back to what Tom was talking about, the COVID thing just disrupted everything. So we can also look at the possibility of having a gathering of opportunities where people can once again learn about what these things are. New people who aren't getting that information now. I imagine there are a lot of people in our congregation who'd be very interested in reconciling,
yeah, there is a,
participating in that if they knew
If
something
they knew
about it.
about
well, there are new people interested in kind of updating, reconciling. What I don't see is adult.
What's interesting about, let's take reconciling, for example. I think that it's changed dramatically from 2014, when Desert Southwest became a reconciling conference. So the push of who we are now,
that was 2009.
Hmm.
I was on that committee.
okay, that's fine, doesn't matter. From that time on, reconciling hasn't had the same type of emphasis as what it has since then, especially in the wake of General Conference not changing. That's been a very frustrating space where it remains the same way and then has gone and becoming increasingly acrimonious about it. And so the energy around that committee has been very different than what it was pre that time. And so I think we have to look and see, do we redefine that committee and or any other committee from what used to be to what we want it to be now? Because any of the committees can be extremely broad. But what do we want it to be? Because it can be as simple as, let's go do Tucson Pride. That could be the reconciling committee.
question, I want to go back.
Could
to
you
what-
repeat that?
Tucson Pride could be the emphasis of the reconciling committee or any other number of different things. But that committee has to redefine what is its emphasis now in today's world, in this moment.
Okay, so going back to Chuck, when you talked about, yeah, what, we did that opportunity fair, Wendy, that you talked about. Can you imagine a scenario in which we have our church-wide meeting, that summit we're talking about, where we're focused on the future and stuff, and have the fair at that same meeting where maybe we get a lot of people to come, and a part of it is they get to walk around and talk, but also we have the opportunity for an interactive session, or do they need to be two separate things?
Maybe we do two steps in terms of this committee. We have, get our stuff together and have an idea of what we want out of that gathering, and then have that gathering. I think that would be a good opportunity to find new information, what people are actually interested in versus what we have imagined in our small group that they're interested in. And as well as maybe recruiting new people.
But the question you're asking is, should we combine the two?
Is there a chance that we would get more people to do them both if we had them at the
I
same
think-
time?
What I'm saying is that would be step two, and yes, I agree with
But
that.
we need to have our act together
We need
before
to
we can
have
get to
our
that,
act together.
for
Yeah.
sure.
That's what I'm
We
saying.
can do that immediately, like
Yeah.
I would say, let's do a fair next week.
No,
Yeah.
I just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, no,
So
that's-
I think that's.
I think there are different. People feel different about different kind of things, and to assume that everybody would equally enjoy both sides of it is wrong. And so I think it's like, two separate activities, might be weekend back to back, but the folks that are gonna come, maybe looking for one, or they can do it, they could care less about the broader theme where the church is. What committees are out there I could be doing, as opposed to, well, where are we going as a church, which
Yeah.
there are two different personalities out there and needs. So I think both things need to happen, but not, not simultaneously.
Jim had his hand up.
I think part of the issue is this as well. One of the things that St. Francis has done wonderfully and marvelously through the years is that when someone brought up something, we empowered them. Right, like Joe's water thing. That's an amazing thing about what St. Francis has done. But it also makes it so that we are scattered like this. Is that what's most helpful to us, the body moving together today? Or do we limit what happens and have two or three really good things, which means that we limit out people who are outliers? And I don't know what's the best idea that way, because I love the amount of empowerment that has gone into the things that have formed Tihan and Iskashida and ISP and all of those things. But that scattering makes it harder to march as a team.
Well, in fact, there was a time, that people, I'm representing St. Francis. Because they happened to like that particular activity, and they thought that, they were all, it was, how can you say you represent St. Francis if you're only one person? And, maybe there's you should admit to 5 people that are agree that the church should in fact be represented, but people got carried away with that, and just, and I guess that's fine, it's just my work. But
We have reached the end of our 15 minutes.
Uh-oh.
And
I wanted to,
I'd like to add something here if I can too, because I'm gonna have to leave in a minute and go eat a lot of cake. But what I want to say is that to Jim's point, I know that we spread ourselves thin, but the dynamic of responding to the immediate need is one of our strengths, I think.
It's an amazing thing.
It is amazing. And I think taking in Francisco at a time when he needed that, when we didn't have any preparation to do that. And Jim said to us at that time that he had all confidence that we would figure it out. And we did. And that maybe if we are going to be a living vitality, reaching out to the community entity, we're going to have to live with the scatteredness too. So that's just what I wanted to share, and I appreciate the closed caption. I appreciate being able to read you, and thank you
Thank you.
for now.
Thanks.
I had one other follow-up question, which is, could we imagine a way that people would continue to be empowered, but there might be a process if somebody has a good idea, rather than they just call the office one day, they talk to Melissa, or they talk to you, and it's like, okay, they're starting this thing. And then we read about it in a newsletter. Could the Council on Ministries and SHAR's, whatever SHAR's building, be the clearinghouse or the hub for new ideas and innovations and ways to respond? And so that there's a little bit of a process by which, yeah, we can go with that. And maybe even, you know, if it's gonna take some money, talk to the finance committee early to see, is there any flexibility in any line items that we might access, that sort of thing.
I think that would be a really, really great idea. And here's one reason why. There's probably many, but this is the one that I have noticed since I've been here, which is, I don't know how long, 9 months now, I don't know. That coming out of COVID or our aging, I'm not sure, that people are not clear about what they want. So people will say, I want this, but they ain't showing up. I mean, all the programs I started really small and have grown, and that I love that, but I really had to curate what I was doing, and not all of them are like that. So it would be great to have some kind of clearinghouse and process from which we were making those decisions. And then, but then on other hands, I would like the ability to go, let's try this.
Yeah.
Especially if it doesn't got like, you know, the classes I'm teaching, you know, yeah, I haven't heard anything. They're not charging, they're not, you know, but I think that's right on, because I think people coming out of whatever the lockdown thing has rearranged them. So when you're saying, what do you want? They're going back to what they wanted 2 years ago. And sometimes we just don't have the volunteer staff to support some of the things people want.
And a follow-up question
I'd
to
like-
what do you want? It's always good. What are you gonna do?
Okay, I'm gonna bring this to an end.
Do it.
Because we need to put on paper where we go with the next meeting. You have brought a lot of things to the surface, and I know there's been a question, there's one question on the table about whether we have 2 separate meetings where people sign up for participation committees like we used to have. And then we have another meeting where everybody talks about the vision for St. Francis. But others have said that we should bring it together. We should have both at the same time. So that's one question that has arisen, but where do we go from here?
I like the type of discussion we've had, but the 4 questions, I think with maybe the exception of the third one, any one of them could have been a whole topic for the night.
So we're not done with these, I don't think.
Is that it?
And I think we need an action plan. I do think that there are certain steps that we might agree on that we could take. Some are baby steps.
Now,
Yeah.
are you
Yeah.
talking about an outcome, an action plan with an outcome?
I think it might be toward the end that we want. It's like, how do we get there? It's like, you know, part of it is the discussion to figure out, as I think Wendy keeps saying, you know, what's our purpose? What do we want to be?
Yeah.
So what are the action steps to get us there? Is what I'm thinking.
Okay, well, having done a lot of strategic plans.
Mhm.
I would suggest, in terms of schedule is for, this is the 3rd Tuesday.
Uh-huh.
Put it down 30, you always can cancel a meeting. Always can cancel, but put it down a regular, it's we go on the third Tuesday at 5 o'clock, okay, until otherwise advised.
So now, but the October meeting, can we continue this discussion and take it to the next level, the
Yeah.
next step?
So
Because there were
but can we
questions that
further
came up.
define that? Because what I heard was a lot about vision and who we are, and why we are here, and then what are we going to do? So can that be a focus for our next meeting, is to be defined?
define the vision.
that is the vessel within,
That
that
fell
we
under
can
one of
operate
the,
within sight of.
questions that we had.
I mean, if you want to look at vision, we can just, you can pull up our vision mission statement. I can, you know, you can get that and we can look at that, but I'm not certain that that's where I really want to go. I think that for me, what we're talking about more is not vision, it's who are we? And I mean that not what we dream of completely, but who are we today? That's not who we were 2 years ago.
To me, they're kind of in the same ballpark, but
Yeah,
You mean, but not vision for Big St. Francis and reaching out to the community and changing the world in social justice,
just
but
as
more about.
committee.
yeah, because I think much of the,
Or you can call it a
Vision for
charter,
us.
you can call it a charter, whatever you want.
Yeah, roles.
But
and
it's
responsibilities,
the
I think
guidelines for how we're gonna govern. Who we are is a governing body.
Yeah, we are that. What does that mean?
what does it mean? That's right.
And then
It needs to be
intersects.
involved with governing.
Well,
Well,
Sure.
I think we
There's
actually
something
need to
going
look
on
at
here. We
what
need to hear
the
from you.
structure stated here is, because it clearly states what structure is for this committee. I think we need to at least look at that and
Oh,
see
yeah. Is
what
this
of
what
that
you're-
actually pertains and what doesn't. Because it's very clear, structure,
Clear.
envision, plan, implement, and annually evaluate the ministry of the congregation. Are we going to be doing any of that or not? And how are we going to do that?
And that's in reference to the charge conference and
No, that's in reference to the church council. The administrative agency, the church conference, we are envisioning planning. That's what we are doing as the church council.
oh, I see.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So it, you know, that's the structure.
I have one.
That's a
You have
lot.
one?
That's a-
Okay, well, if each one of you can get
I'm-
notes,
I'm,
you could just send them over to me in some way, shape, or form. Preferably an email,
Yes.
so that I can take it from there. And from what I heard, you wish to go on with the questions that we started with. Right.
So to drill down on them and have a better defined,
Okay. Well, we still need to hear what's going on in finance.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Do you want to take a minute to just talk briefly
Yes,
about that right
please.
now? I think
Yes.
we are, this is the short version. Our income is down in comparison to our budget here today, and our expenses are up in comparison. That's the wrong direction. Let me just say that. We've had some extraordinary capital expenditure needs and some other things that contribute to the situation. Our apportionment is in the budget. So if we're falling short on our income and we can't pay the apportionment, that's probably the first thing that goes by the wayside. And we have paid $27,000 toward our apportionment that's in this year. And the finance committee has asked Jim for some recommendations because we have an unrestricted estate gift that we can use. It's $21,000 roughly, and we think that can make a big dent in the apportionment problem that we have. But we would fall short by the end of the year. We would not make it to that $77,000.
Is this something that's new, that endowment hasn't been told? about?
It's a new unrestricted gift to St. Francis. So Karen knows all about it. And it's Engel is the name of the gift.
Lloyd. If you
Oh,
remember
Lloyd
him.
Engel. Oh, okay.
But it was for St. Francis and it talks about fulfilling, there's some language, but anyway. So that.
What is our total apportionment for this year?
Just over
77.
So we paid 27.
And
Is
we
it
really
27?
paid 27 in this year. We were thinking we were paying it toward last year, but but it doesn't matter. It's when they get it, that's when they count it.
That's right.
So we'll just go along with them too and say, okay, we paid 27 so far this year. We could potentially put another 21 in, which it's better than we've done in some past years.
Yeah,
Um,
much better.
But the hard part is, I mean, part of what's happening that Paula's talking about is that costs, you've noticed it, are up everywhere. And so if we call a repair person, and we've had to call several repair people this year,
Yeah.
it costs more today than what it did last year, significantly more. And so that's part of the cost that's gone up.
And we've got an aging physical.
We have an
plant.
aging physical
We've
plant.
got irrigation systems that are old, we have roofs that are old, we have the plumbing that's old, I mean, anyway.
Mm.
So, and we're in this bind where we want to be able to be staffed appropriately, we want to be able to have wonderful music here. And we are anticipating that we will end this year in deficit. We're not going to be in bankruptcy or in trouble because we have been very careful over the last couple of years and built a bit of a cash reserve for the rainy days that have hit us. But we cannot build a budget expecting to be in deficit again next year. The clock will run out this year in terms of that, and we may be in a position where the church council will need to really weigh in. I mean, the finance, we can make the numbers add up, but we should not make decisions about what are the priorities, about is music more important than childcare? Is this more important than that? And so our fiscal year starts again January. We're gonna be building the budget in November and talking about it November, December. So it's upon us, and we're worried about it. So stewardship campaign is gonna kick off. We're gonna make a real pitch to have people consider what they can pledge and to actively be involved with us. Karen Bliss and Peggy Schlosser are gonna help lead that campaign.
Excellent.
We'll be
Yeah.
talking in the services, they'll have different speakers. I want to talk to you about 7:45. And it's Grace in Action, and so that'll be our theme. So I would like to do something else with my volunteer time rather than worry about money. And we're worried about money, and it's somehow, we've just got to come to terms with the fact that we may not be able to plan for next year to have the income that will allow us to do everything we want to do. And so what's going to be important to keep
So
and
if
what
you're
has to
going to
go.
need the voice of church council, what month would be best for
December.
December?
Yep.
So
So we'll be working on it in November, and then we'll kick it to
it's
you.
operations in December. So next month, we are going to continue to define vision and all the things that go with that. Including, Jim, you're going to bring the
I'll bring an
chart.
organ. I'll try to figure out just what exactly are the important elements. That's the
Right.
hard part. Putting the committees down is easy, how they interact.
Yeah.
And how that,
Do you need a reminder?
no,
But
no.
yeah,
I
so
got
there
it.
may be some dotted lines, you may have some circles rather than squares, you might have a.
Are you talking about
wheel.
people now? I'm just kidding.
But there might be some piece of it that might be a wheel with something in the middle of the hub and then spokes.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think drawing something that we could understand is the most important thing.
Yeah, and that's the hard, that's, as I thought about it, is just trying to figure out what makes sense of things. And how do we want to make sense of it too?
That's the conundrum of St. Francis, what makes sense.
Yeah,
But to
Yeah.
understand what it is now, so that if we're envisioning changing that, what will be the ripple effects organization?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I will put that as the goal that you're going to bring.
yeah, I'll figure out something.
And if you want to bounce it off of anybody before we get to that meeting.
Yeah.
Some of us would be very happy to talk
Look
about
at
it.
And I'm there every Thursday,
So
and you're there all the time.
She lives there.
are there any
Yeah.
other comments for the evening?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanna-
Meeting adjourned.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you for giving us this opportunity to have this conversation.
Thank you for all the help that you have provided for making this move forward.
Much more engaged.
Cecilia, how did this work for you being in Zoom?
I'd rather be there in person, but I just couldn't get there in time.
Okay, okay,
So, but I would rather be there in person.
yeah,
So the next meeting in October will
Thank
be
you.
in person also. And maybe next time you could make it in person, fingers crossed.
I usually can, so
Yeah.
and how did this room seem to work?
A little chilly, but
Was that chilly? Okay,
If you have 2 or 3 more people, it might be kind of challenging.
yeah,
Well,
but we could put another, those are platforms, so we can have a
It
stage,
actually.
but we could put another table or something too. Yeah,
Okay.
Oh, I'm all ready.
I think it offers a lot.
It does.
It's not,
Now.
Well, today was the day of.
it's not biblical, but it's
It's
every,
Yeah.
all